the most important book that nobody ever reads. And we forget that it's one of the best pieces of writing in this last century that's changed lives so incredibly, not just in India, but across the world.
Hi everyone, welcome to Chalchitra Talks. मेरा नाम वाणी है and this is a very special episode. I had the opportunity to sit down with Sanjoy Roy, who is the Managing Director of Teamwork Arts, the company that produces the Jaipur Literature Festival. And in this episode, we spoke a lot about books, artists, music, theatre. The list is endless. And if you're new to the channel, we're about to hit 100k subscribers, so do like, share and subscribe to the channel. And without wasting further time, let's just jump right in. Hi sir, how are you? Welcome to Chalchitra Talks.
Thanks, Vani. Good to be here. And I'm sorry it's taken so long to find us a date and time to do this, but very excited to be here in Chalchitra.
Not a problem at all. I'm so glad you could make it. But since you run festivals, I just wanted to ask you, who are your best or favorite interviewers?
Karan Thapar is one of the best because he used to do Eyewitness and he's so fabulously incisive. But also people like Shoma Chaudhary and Barkha Dutt and Rajdeep, they're very good with what they do. Shubhra is great when it comes to some film interviews, etc. Many of the old-timers also continue to do a great job.
And I know there will be a long list, but do you have any questions that really put you off?
You know, what is your 10 most favorite things? What is your 10 most favorite writers? What's your 10 most favorite books? And the worst is what's new this year. I mean, typically before every festival, invariably a journalist will say, "To sir, is saal naya kya hai?" At which point I want to sort of, kill. Ki naya kya hai? Look at the program, do your homework, then come and ask. The books are new, the writers are new, everything is new. Every second is new. It's not,
Right.
Even as the second passes by, it's now become old. Everything else is new. So that's a really irritating question.
But since we're talking about festivals, I also wanted to ask you, and this was a question for the later half, but I'll just ask it right away. Do you also have a wish list when it comes to JLF? Like, are there any authors that you're yet to get and you really, really want to get them?
Of course, Vani. I mean, our wish list sort of continues year and year. And I'll give you an example. The year we had Naipaul, we had already wanted him 6 years before that. So every year he was pretty much on our wish list. And, sometimes it takes time, or an Alif Shafaq or a Chimamanda or even Ram Guha, who we hadn't had at Jaipur for many years this year. We've got him at JLF London, for example. Every year we sort of hope that they will come and join us the next year. Sometimes it's because of their schedule, sometimes it's because of our schedule, or they're writing a new book, or they're really, busy with other stuff. So, it's an ongoing, a moving program. But by and large, whoever we invite, sooner or later, we're able to receive on one of our many platforms.
Nice. And what is your relationship with reading?
Oh, I love reading. I've always loved reading. From when I was a kid, that used to be my go-to place. So, whether it was when I was in school in Bombay, when I'd come back to India, as to, every week when I used to get my pocket money, as to get into the bus and come to Colaba Causeway. And, there was this street vendor where you used to get the latest Asterix or the latest Tintin. As you went by, whether it was Enid Blyton or the Hardy Boys or whatever it is. And later, when one got to the 10th standard, it was a lot of history, a lot of war history. I used to love war history for some unknown reason. And we used to stay very close to the Delhi Gymkhana on Teen Murti Marg, which is where my parents were staying. And so my evening go-to place was the library, and just, picking up books and coming back and having a great conversation with the librarian who we were completely terrified of. And now, of course, I do a homework reading. So, any session that I have to do an interview for, so I have to read that book or book of the author. Reading that I'd love to do, books that come to my desk and I just, make a short list. So at any given point of time, I read about 6 or 7 books at the same time and go from one book to the other. I don't have a favorite medium. I tend to read just about everything. You give me a book on history or philosophy or AI or science fiction. I'm equally excited about discovering something that's new. What I don't read is self-help books. I go screaming far away from any self-help books. So that's a genre that I haven't been able to yet quite crack. And of course, I love biographies, autobiographies, and fiction, and some poetry. I mean, I'm not a great poetry aficionado, but some poetry, lots of theater.
Nice. And you mentioned you read 6 to 7 books at the same time. I have been struggling with juggling a lot of books, but what I do is I have set a particular time for each book. So in the morning, I'm reading certain something. In the afternoon, I'll be reading a certain something. And there are also corners. So if I'm sitting in this corner, there is a particular book for this corner. Do you also have certain hacks like this? Because I know a lot of our readers, a lot of people in my book club struggle with reading a lot of books at the same time.
No, because my day is structured in such a way. So when I wake up after I finish my meditation and get ready, then I look at my phone, and then I look at my phone in the evening. So, and I do whatever social media, WhatsApp, blah, blah, blah. In between the day, it's back to back Zoom or meetings at the office, or if I'm traveling outside, that it's, city a day, whatever has to be done. I read on flights. And then when I go home every evening, of course, if you're not entertaining or being entertained, then it's the book, A book or B book, depending on, how my mood is structured, or, as I said, what I have to get out of the way. Presently, I know that I've got a whole slew of conversations lined up for JLF's Vaibhav. So I'm doing a lot of catch-up reading or revisiting books that I haven't read. So Good Muslim, Bad Muslim by Mahmood Mamdani, one of the 10 greatest thinkers out of Africa. Huma Aberdeen's book, which is her biography, because I'm doing a session with her. Navdeep Suri's new translation that he's done on Nanak Singh's work from 1948. So it's really an array of work. And that's really so exciting.
You also mentioned you read some fiction. So we were doing this session with Nasiruddin Shah for a similar episode, and Sir mentioned that when he reads fiction, he likes to imagine that he's playing the protagonist. Like, he imagines that everything is happening to him. What kind of a reader are you? Do you also like to put yourself into characters, or do you like to look at things in a third person?
It depends on how good a book is. If a book is good, it sweeps you away and places you in the center of the book. So it is not that you have to imagine you being A or B or C. It's really part of that. It sets the stage, and it just completely, I mean, there are some books, for example, that I hated that it will end, because, it's so beautifully constructed. I mean, Tarun Tejpal's latest tome, which is like 800 pages, you don't want it to finish because every chapter is so rich in characters, so rich in its setting, that you really want to be part of it. And then I dream vivid dreams. I mean, I dream 70 dreams. So, invariably the characters, of course, they get mixed up completely, but they appear as part of that, and they make you feel that you're part of this sweep of civilization, which is what a good book is.
Nice. And I know you said you hate questions like these, but I have to ask you, do you have any recommendations in terms of books that are very important that you would wish a lot of youth will read?
So, yeah, sure. Because of the kind of narrative of hatred that we're seeing around us, that all Mughals were bad, all Mughals were invaders, or all Muslims were invaders, etc. And much of it is based on WhatsApp fact, which is actually fiction. So one of the books that everybody must read is Ira Mukhoti's Akbar. It's a biography on Akbar. It's absolutely fabulous, which really tells you how much Akbar and his wives, how much they supported, whether it was giving lands to the temples in Mathura and Vrindavan and across, etc., to the way that they restructured and they helped construct so many temples, looked after cattle and feed, ensured that, no cows were killed. So, to correct this narrative, That's an important book. The other one I think is equally fabulous is Indica, which I call Earth Beneath Your Feet, which is by Pranay Lal, which is an exhaustive telling of India through its geological story about how it was part of this larger landmass and then broke away and floated away with the Antarctica and then made its way across the Indian Ocean. And as it crossed Africa, it let go of the Madagascar island, which merged with the Africa plate or got stranded on the Africa plate. And then as it continued over the volcanoes which erupted, the land was lifted and you have what we now know as the Western Ghats. And then finally it arrives at the Asia plate and then it burrows under, creating the Himalayas. And the fact that every time we walk on this ancient landmass, as is much of the world, we're unaware that we're treading on something that's billions of years or in the making, and we're so disrespectful to that history. So Indica by Pranay Lal is the other book that I would say is a must read. And those people who are interested in AI and the arts of AI and creativity, well, Marcus du Sautoy's fabulous new book on AI and the arts is fantastic. Exile by Navteet Sarna on Duleep Singh, Shabani Basu's Spy Princess, which is Inayat Khan, who was, one of the first women spies in the World War, and what happened to her. It's a beautiful whodunit story. So yeah, there's so many books that are so important. V.S. Naipaul, Tarun Tejpal's own books, Arundhati Roy, Leela Seth's book on her biography, vital. And most importantly, the most important book that nobody ever reads, though we study the first page, is India's Constitution, which has to be the most brilliant document in this last 100 years, based on which so many countries have created their own constitution. And we forget that it's one of the best pieces of writing in this last century that's changed lives so incredibly, not just in India, but across the world.
So do you also listen to podcasts?
I'm not a great listener because I tend to have ADHD. So I prefer to read. If I read something, it embeds itself in my head. If I listen to something, because I'm always listening to music, for example, it's in the background and it doesn't sit in my head, So even in class, when I was in the odd occasion that I did make class in university, for me, I had to read, read the book that the lecture was based on rather than just listen, because listening, I find it difficult.
Yes, this was actually my next question. What is your relationship with music? Do you listen to what kind of...
I listen to everything. I mean, I've always loved music. I've always dreamt of singing or playing. I used to play the violin and I used to play the recorder when I was in school outside of India. I'm not a great singer, but I've been part of musicals. I love all kinds of music, world music, classical, Western classical, Indian classical. I'm not a great Bollywood fan per se, but I love some of the Shankar Ehsaan Loy music compositions, the Sonu Nigams, the Kailash Khers, stuff that's different. And I'm happy to listen to everything, when I'm driving. Obviously, the radio is on most of the time. Earlier, I couldn't go to sleep if I wasn't listening to music. Even as a young person, I had to listen to music to be able to go to sleep. Now, of course, it's different. I don't do that anymore, but yeah.
There's this question I ask all of my guests, actually. And this is something I got interested in because I realized when I grew up, when I started adulting, you always think adults have it sorted. But then as you grow up, you kind of lose out on habits that you used to have as a child. So perhaps reading a book before you go to bed or just washing your face, etc. You kind of start becoming lazy. And this is something I ask all my guests. What is your process of winding down at the end of the day? Do you have certain rituals that really put you at ease? That if you're feeling uncomfortable...
Yeah, I mean, reading, of course, 101% reading. And now, of course, you tend to get distracted with social media because you have to catch up. You have to post some stuff, manage every message across all the many networks, which I'm terrible with, So I always get some flack on that, or just complete your WhatsApp messages, which of course pile up every second. So, you finish that chore, so to speak, and then I read. But that's roughly how my day sort of winds down.
There's this blogger as well called Maria Popova, and she used to run this, yes, and she talks about creating pockets of stillness. So, do you also have any pockets of stillness where you kind of go to when you're not at rest, but you need to find comfort? Are there any certain?
These are luxuries for people like me whose time gets so divided and controlled by other people. I'm not a master of my own time, but my go-to place pre-COVID used to be on the plane. I used to be flying, 10 or 15 days in a month. And that was my me time where it's nobody else. I used to growl at whoever wanted to come to say hello in the plane. But that was my me time to catch up with my reading, catch up with any films that I hadn't seen or I wanted to see, etc. In fact, 10 days ago when I was flying out to Europe on Vistara, before they actually canceled the flight, they boarded us. And I checked with my colleague. I said, I heard Thappad is, a very good movie. I'm not great with watching Hindi movies, but I'd heard it was very good. So I said, let me catch up with watching Thappad. And of course, I missed Dune. So I was all set to watch Dune till the flight got canceled. So much for that. But that's my me time. I mean, during COVID, of course, there was lots more opportunity for me time because, I used to pretty much sit by myself in the room that I had taken over, which is one of our living areas. And so that became my zone, though I was on Zoom 24/7, doing more work than I normally do. But that still gave you an opportunity for your me time. And the other time that I spend, which is my me time, is with our many dogs and cats. We have 3 cats, we have 5 dogs. So, dealing with them and talking to them and entertaining them. Cats you have to entertain, dogs entertain you.
Do you have any BC to AD events, like something that really transformed your life, transformed the trajectory of your personality and shaped it inherently?
So pre-COVID, life was always so complicated in the sense of travel and all of that you very rarely looked at the opportunity of what else could be done when you were still. What COVID did was created that opportunity of being in one place. Nice. So it did a number of things. It improved my sleep. I could eat in a way that was healthy, which then helped improve my sleep because I'm an insomniac. And in turn, that made me much more productive during the day. COVID also allowed me to discover the artist in me. So it started with somebody saying that, somebody had auctioned a canvas and called me and said, we're raising this money for an arts group and we've auctioned a canvas that you've painted. I said, but I don't paint. And they said, no, but now we've auctioned it. So, we're sending you the canvas and we're sending you some paint. So paint. And I'm like, no way, I've never painted anything that I've ever attempted has been horrible. And so I told Punita, my wife, I said, this is what they're asking me to do. How do you paint? Because she's, she also does a lot of creative work. And she said, no, you have to sit down and think about what you want to say. I said, I don't want to say anything. And then she came up with, a couple of painting techniques. She said that could suit me. And then I became this painting fiend. So I used to use this color pouring method to create artwork, which now hangs on many of our colleagues and friends' homes and walls, because that was the COVID therapy. So every weekend was this painting expedition.
Would you say that painting is your new pocket of stillness that you've picked up during COVID?
Well, during COVID, it was. Now life has gone back to square one. So I haven't gone back to painting, though we threaten every weekend. But it's so fraught with either being entertained or entertaining that it's difficult.
I also want to ask you, what is your relationship with movies?
When one was younger, when going to see a movie was a social event or a date night, you went to many more movies. Today, movies are much more personalized space. So you just watch it on your screen, or in my case, most of my movies I watch on a plane. So yes, movie viewing has changed, has completely changed. when we go to our home in Goa, which is a far more compact home with one living space, which also has a television, then we tend to maybe watch a series together, but that's roughly it. Or if, when you're invited to a premiere and you've been involved in it in some way, either supporting it or helping in it, or somebody who is starring in it, whether it's a Manoj Bajpayee film or whatever, then yes, that, then as a special screening, one would go.
What about theatre, plays and theatre? Do you have any recommendations for that as well? For somebody especially who's looking out to explore the scene?
Through the lockdown, we had the opportunity of screening all the plays over the last few years that we had recorded as part of a Mahindra Excellence in Theatre Awards and Festival. And some of them, so people can go onto the Meta website and see some of the most brilliant productions out of India. So the interesting thing is Meta looks at plays across languages, and of course there's subtitles to make it more accessible. So not only do you see theater and view theater, but you're also able to view and see the tradition of theater across the country. And there's, the language, the color, the design, the way theater is staged, whether it's in the Northeast, which is completely different from the way you'd see where the Northeast theater is far more still and far more choreographed, with movements are very, very defined, all the way to Kerala, which is far more in your face. Again, it's very visual, very in your face, very protest theater, to Maharashtra, which is more eloquent, it's more verbal, to Delhi, which is much more cosmopolitan. So different forms of theater and tradition. But I must say, last week I watched The Life of Pi at the Wyndham Theatre, and my God, the design of that is absolutely brilliant. And I think the funniest comment I heard was two Indians. Life of Pi has been going house full week after week, and there were two Indians sitting next to me, one saying to the other, "But ये तो अजीब टाइप का म्यूजिकल थिएटर है, इसमें म्यूजिक ही नहीं है, तो ये किस टाइप का म्यूजिकल थिएटर है?" So, they'd heard it was very popular, they'd bought their tickets thinking it was a musical on the West End, like The Lion King or whatever, but it wasn't. It's a play. But the design is so spectacular that at the end of the play, I saw them standing up as the standing ovation was happening. Pretty much the first to jump up to their feet and be transformed by the magic, which is the magic of theater.
I cannot end the conversation without asking about your hair care rituals. Do you have any secrets that you can please care to share with us?
Yeah, well, I use an organic shampoo called Avalon, which earlier is to get out of America. Now I think you can get it anywhere. And I use a Moroccan, a conditioner. And I use Kama Brindisi hair oil, which I do once a week. And I have a wonderful hairstylist who comes to see me once every couple of months, Sagir, who looks after my hair. So we've gone back, when we were kids and we used to go to our grandparents' home in Calcutta, the house barber or the napit, as they said, used to come to the house. You didn't go out. And now it's come this whole 360-degree, right, life cycle, where now again, your hairstylist or your barber comes home and looks after your hair, which has made it so much more comfortable and so much easier. But in actuality, I do very little. I brush my hair in the morning and I brush it in the evening, and that's what it is.
Thank you so much, sir, for doing this.
Hey, folks, if you've loved this talk, please do like and share Chalchitra Talks. They're a wonderful YouTube channel bringing to you recommendations across film and literature and food and so much more. And I think we all need recommendations in our life. The best thing to do is word of mouth. I think that's the best kind of endorsement. So thank you, Vani and Vaibhav and Saurabh, for doing this, and best wishes, and may Chalchitra continue to be viewed by millions from across the world.